Hi everyone. I'm going to quickly share my screen. Here we are. I've shared the mock page directly. So I've been reading about the NMAT as well as some people have started taking it. In general, the feedback I am having is that the quant indeed is slightly on the tougher side. Maybe the logical reasoning section may have a few extra or a higher percentage of critical reasoning questions, and quant may be slightly on the tougher side. I was thinking today maybe we can touch a bit upon verbal and RCs. Have you all solved one of them live now? And then let's discuss that so that I can maybe transfer the knowledge of how I would want you all to handle reading comprehensions, especially on the NMAT, and maybe prepare or how to in general improve your reading comprehension. So uh, let's do that maybe for today then. So let me open one of my RC. So review all, and let's keep an eye. We'll also study today, maybe we can do it together, as to how many questions are coming of the analogy type, how many parajumbles, how many those fill in the blanks with the prepositions especially, and how many RCs. So let me take a shorter passage right now. So first let's maybe take a third one here. Okay, I guess that was the last passage. The middle one. So I'm going to check the number of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll give you all 8 minutes. I want you all to solve this passage now live and key in your chain of answers for the 4 questions. It'll be interesting. Okay. Unlike quant, now you can tell me your answers and then we'll discuss. So take 8 minutes. Give me a thumbs up and then I will start the timer. Great. So let 8 minutes start now. Okay, 10:12. We'll stop at max 10:20. And ideal, take 5 minutes. So that should be the speed, but if need be, accuracy more important. Check. When you'll need me to move to the next screen, again, you can quickly maybe type in. There are 4 questions, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you can type in the question number and I'll go to that screen. Okay. Okay. Last 2 minutes. And then I want you all to key in your 4 answers. Okay. Let's start with this question itself. Okay. I want you all to key in your answer for this question. And I want everyone to key in some answer. Then we'll start with how I handle an RC. Okay. I've received one. I'm waiting for everyone to key in their answers. Good, good. Okay. So let's say I'm in the exam and I start reading it. So through this passage, rather the aim is not to, really do just this passage, but how do I tackle the verbal part in general and especially this reading comprehension part? And its stake will always be higher for me than any other this thing because it's fundamental. You go to do an MBA, you'll have to do case studies. Today, the problem is not less data or less info, there's more data, more info. So, how do I extract the essence of things? There are 100-page case studies if you're getting into consulting. You can't sit and read all of it. So, when to speed up, when to slow down, what to leave, what not to leave are all skills we have to keep developing. Now, overall, let's anyways make our universe the RCs that are going to come on this standardized test, CAT, SNAP, and NMAT. One common question people ask is, should we make or should we jot down the essence? Should we reread? Should we read the questions first? Now look at this. There are, however, people may pitch it, and you'll find different companies pitching it different ways. For me, the truth is there is no fixed answer. Right? It just depends. Sometimes reading the questions may be more beneficial first. It may give you an idea of what to look for. But overall, am I a big fan of it? No. Because you'll have 3 or 4 questions on the RC, and usually, if they are well set exams, you can't sort of get away without having read the RC nicely. You can't skim through. So best is to get control of the RC first, not read the question directly, May not help too much, may help you save some time, a few seconds here and there, but that's not really the challenge to save 5 or 10 seconds. If it was saving 3 or 4 minutes, I would still maybe, agree to it. But what about making a map and rereading? Making a map. Ideally, I would not make a map. If I'm losing context, if that is how I am at present, if I lose context quickly, if the passage was too long, then I would make that map. So again, see, it depends. If you're not evolved in reading up till that level that you can do it without a map, then it's counterproductive. Make a map in the exam at least. When you're reviewing this RC, see, always there's a timed attempt and there's an untimed attempt. At ease, everything should be looked at in the no time limit attempt as well. And when you're at ease, try and process it in the brain. But on that day in the exam, if that's what works for you naturally, then do that, right? Because you finally want to get it right. So, if you're giving a mock exam, then during the exam, if you feel you will lose it in the middle and the passage seems long, then write. Otherwise, if you can handle it, then don't write. When you review it later and you're trying to become a better reasoner, that time try and process it in the head because the mind is super fast, right? So you want to get rid of the pen. But you see my example, or you see my point, there's no right or wrong that, oh, I will get more questions right if I were to make notes. But that will take extra time as well, right? So if you can keep everything in the head, then that is still better. What to do in that moment, let your intuition guide rather than, hard and fast rules like, oh, I read the question first or I make notes. Similarly, when to reread. I've seen people give pieces of advice like, if it's too long, read again. If it's maybe read the last paragraph again. No, for me, it simply means the aim should be to read once, read nicely and slowly. At times, you might pick up speed. At times, you might have to slow down. Depends on the difficulty of the sentence for you again. It's very subjective. If you are finding it difficult, slow down. If you are finding it easy, speed up. And that is the skill. And that leads to my next answer. Should I reread or not? If you feel you've lost the gist of the passage, you have to go back to where you had it. Or you may skip the RC depending on the time and all. But I'm saying it again depends. If you've not lost it, you can keep going ahead. But don't try and skim through the passage. And therefore, don't try and go through so fast that you didn't understand and eventually you'll have to reread. And maybe anyways, you've made a note that I will reread. So what could be optimal is maybe go at a decent clip. And the details may not be clear, but you should know where what is given overall. And then if need be, reread according to the question given. But again, I'm not making it a generalistic advice because when I make this, people then read very fast and then in the questions they want to come back, but sometimes they've read it so fast that they're not clear where to come back. Sometimes the question may be tricky and may refer to two portions in the paragraph. If you read fast, you might not know that there were two aspects to it. So nothing substitutes for understanding. You read at the pace you understand. That can't change. You want to increase the pace at which you understand? There's no substitute for you reading classics or high level, well written books, right? That can increase your pace. Read harder material. You know how people prep? Oh, on the final day, I'll put 110% effort and read a little quicker. But if you want to prep, then you prep by reading maybe material that is actually harder than the final day. So that final day, you feel you're reading something easier rather than trying to think that I'll level up on the final exam and I can under prep now, over prep. So those are the ways in which you can increase your pace. But the speed reading courses being sold can't happen at the cost of accuracy and understanding. You see what I'm saying? So once, let's say the exam day has come, then on that day, whatever it is, you have to read at the speed at which you understand. You can't cheat that metric. Very important for me. Because what happens then we panic. Cascading effect happens because we've not understood in that little less time. The questions won't come. If 2 or 3 questions consecutively don't come, the mood starts to dampen. And the next question becomes, you don't want to attempt that next question. Better, no, read at the pace you understand. There's enough time. 4 minutes, 6 minutes are there are 480 seconds, and you'll find that it's quite a good amount of time. Now coming to NMAT, here in my experience over the years still, I'm going to now give NMAT specific advice. This was in general for reading comprehension. The passages do tend to be a little on the easier side compared to your CAT, especially, and XAT. So in this exam, now this is my nuanced advice, that you could think of powering through a little faster because the RCs are easier and the time requirement is also easier. No, like it's not 2 to 3 minutes per question, it's almost a minute a question. So if you have an RC with 4 questions, you overall have only 4 minutes, not like 7 or 8 minutes. Correspondingly, the level will also be easier but highly scoring. But still, it doesn't mean that you read it extremely fast. It will automatically go fast because the passage will be more descriptive rather than, some great reasoning involved there. Similarly, the questions what I have seen are slightly simple in terms of the options given. Sometimes what can happen, as you'll see in this passage, that options get uncomfortably close and either one could fit. And sometimes it's just a problem of the examination. Two options may just be, the exam may not be very well set in verbal, that gray area is there. And if you're stuck there, pick one and move on. So the basic thing becomes read, comprehend, and then when it comes to the question, read the option, comprehend the option, and then reason and tick it through. Things will happen a little more smoothly for you. And if you're giving the CAT, you might have to practice a bit of NMAT whenever that exam is close by, because you might need to practice reading at a faster clip, which will also automatically happen because of the descriptive nature, but it needs that practice, right? Check. So far, so good, right? This is what we've seen with NMAT over the years. So let's do this one now, right? Both of you all have gotten E, but let me read one for you and show how I would tackle this RC. So I would read, exporting means the sale of an item produced, stored, or processed in the supplying firm's home country in a foreign land. And I'm making notes right now to show you if I were to make, how would I make it? But not that I would be doing this in the exam. So I come to know, this passage is about exporting. Some firms regard exporting as a little more than a convenient way of increasing total sales. Others see it as a crucial element of overall corporate strategy. Another little descriptive line on exporting. Now, this comes a type of exporting, right? So to say, or a description. Passive exporting. So if I were sort of making that table, I would say, okay, now they've gone into passive exporting, right? Occurs when a firm receives orders from abroad without having canvassed them, meaning clear from the context, without having tried to procure those orders by doing intentional marketing. Active exporting, conversely, results from a strategic decision to establish proper systems for organizing the export function and for procuring foreign sales, right? Simple language, they are distributed it into two. Either we keep it in the head, or you can write passive and active. Active, they're making the effort to get the sales. Exporting, okay. So now I know it's constantly dividing it into types, direct or indirect, right? If there's direct or indirect. With direct, the exporter assumes full responsibility for the transfer to the foreign country, clear the customs, advertise and sale. Everything is happening in-house. It is the whole and soul, right? And it'll enjoy all the profits, but all the risk. Indirect exporting uses intermediaries. Export merchants, for example, reside in the exporter's country, acting as, now read this carefully, right? As soon as I see this, I'm thinking, oh, there's a little bit more nuanced detail, which is possibly anti-intuitive or maybe little different. Till now, it was sort of obvious. So now I will have to slow down for me. If it happens for you, you slow down. If not, you don't. You keep powering through. Export merchants reside in the exporter's country, acting as principals in exports transaction, that is buying and selling on their own accounts. They are wholesalers who operate in foreign markets through their own salespeople, stockists, and perhaps retail outlets. Exporters are relieved of administrative problems, documentation, shipping, internal transport, and do not carry the risk of market failure. However, they lose control over the presentation of their products, and foreign sales may fall because of poor foreign retailing. So it's almost as if, and this understanding should come, if not, I would have had to read it again, that they are simply manufacturing and transporting it to the exporter. Then the one who's actually the merchant who's going to send it abroad. Because see, the export merchants reside in the exporter's country. They are the principals in the transaction. They operate, they take the material abroad, operate in the foreign market through their own sales. So what am I trying to say? This was expected. They are wholesalers who operate in foreign markets through their own salespeople, stockists, retail, but exporters are completely relieved of the administrative documentation and even the shipping. This for me is important. They are relieved of the shipping. That could have otherwise not been the case, or I may not be sure. But the exporters are not even responsible for shipping from their country to the home country, because these export merchants are there in their country. They'll take the goods, they'll take it there, they will sell it. So from almost post manufacturing, you don't have to do anything, but they lose control over the presentation. So the only slightly nuanced point which I stopped and absorbed is that they are not even sending it across. Just from the unit is being lifted off by the export merchant. Now the next paragraph. Exporting is cheap and convenient to administer and carries no risk of failure of direct foreign investments. The revenues from foreign sales accrue entirely to the exporting company rather than it having to repatriate. Now, repatriate, we should know, and from the context, almost sort of sending back to the home country from foreign subsidiaries. And the firm builds up a network of contacts of foreign agents, distributors, retail outlets. Direct exporting provides total control over the selling process, prevents the need to share know-how with foreign partners, and cuts out expensive intermediaries. Exporting can be highly profitable, although the development of an export facility can place severe strain. Now, this is what I found a little, and I wouldn't say it's the students or it will be the reader's problem. This is a problem from the passage, but can we infer, although not written, what is this talking about according to you? Because they've only used the word exporting and almost starting a new para, and really should not have been written like this. But for me, look at it. It carries no risk of failure of direct foreign investments. The revenue accrue entirely to the exporting company, and you're not concerned with having to send a part of the revenue. Let's say if in direct exporting you make money in some other country, you might have to invest something there, do the firm or the corporate social responsibility business there. So you won't have to do that. And you'll automatically, through the merchant responsible, you'll have those agents, those distributors, those retail outlets are working for you. So for me, this is a little nasty, because it's not coming off very clearly. But this looks to be referring to indirect exporting, and therefore they have changed after that. That on the contrary, direct exporting provides total control over the selling process, prevents the need to share know-how with foreign partners, and cuts out expensive intermediaries. Exporting can be highly profitable, but the development of an export facility, and therefore there'll be risk of the direct foreign investment, can be a strain on the business resources. So this for me was very tricky in this passage, or whether it gets used up in the questions or not. But they have almost not mentioned the word indirect here, which is not good, because in direct exporting, you will have risk of direct foreign investments. You are opening up a facility there. You are, marketing over there. So very tricky there. And again, this for me was comprehension then, right? Not at all directly mentioned. And if you power through, we might just miss it, because if you read exporting blankly without focus, it just looks like exporting. Maybe the questions may not be tough, but I wanted to pass on this piece of comprehension for you. Because again, if you're directly exporting, you might have to do some repatriation of profits. And because if your subsidiary is a registered company in that other country, it might have to pay taxes there. It might have to do some corporate social responsibility there, right? You won't sort of have a network of people working for you in direct exporting. So both have been sort of dealt with in further detail. And now, is the passage very clear to me before I go to the questions? A couple of lines on exporting, one line on passive versus active, then a big chunk of the first paragraph on direct versus indirect, and almost the second paragraph entirely on direct versus indirect. And I have firm control over the passage. Can't almost proceed without that, and it'll happen if you read it carefully. For me, another thing is don't lose the flow. And as soon as you feel you've lost the flow, quickly go back. Quickly go back. But don't try and read it in one go with your understanding just continuously diminishing. So now let's look at it. This is what I want to transfer to you again, very importantly, according to the passage. We almost tend to feel that or fill in the gaps on our own, especially in quant, this mistake of ticking the wrong answer. Oh, there were two people, Ram and Sham, and we ticked the quantity with respect to Ram, but they had asked for Sham. Or, the opposite. So what happens because of that speed? So it's completely understandable. But because of that speed, we are almost filling up the blanks on our own. This is how our minds work. Imagine if in some passage this is given, you will automatically take it as read only. So you get what I'm trying to say. Our brains, our minds have developed to automatically, or so to say, autocorrect. Now that's very helpful when it's, sort of strewn around, mistakes are there in the thing you're doing or reading. But here what happens, and this is what we are testing, many people, we sort of read what we want to read and we're not reading literally. For me, in critical reasoning and in reading comprehension on the standardized tests, the number one skill is to read literally. So don't guess what is written. And doesn't it happen in our daily lives? Most of the miscommunication happens is we felt we said something, we felt the other person understood something. And when we listen, we felt we listened to something, whereas the other person has really said something. So it is indeed a problem, in fact, and that's why it's a very important part of corporate culture, where the core skill is important, but the communication is equally important to make things efficient. And it still happens today. You said something, the other person has taken it to be different. So literal reading is a very important skill in this world of ours in which you're working in a team. So literal reading is my emphasis point there. So here, when I read this and I read the word according to the passage, again, that is a very nice clue for me. What according, basically three types of questions for me in an RC. One is these detail-oriented questions, like according to the passage. The passage mentions which of the following. And they, for me, are the easiest. Why? You don't have to do too much of reasoning there. Then you're on to comprehension and you're on to reading. And NMAT will stick to more of these types. Detail-oriented or direct meaning. What was the word used? What is the meaning of the word used in the given context? So very sort of direct questions. They'll take less time. The detail-oriented reasoning is less. Second level, which also the NMAT asks. The central theme of the passage, the primary purpose of the passage, which is sort of different from summary of the passage. But both one level up, you'll still have to think what happens on an overall thematic basis. So you don't have to reason on that very specific paragraph, overall reasoning, but reasoning is involved. And sometimes the options can get quite close. So main purpose, summary, theme of the passage. Now, third, when we read the context, when we read the words, which of the following would the author most likely agree with? Or the passage implies which of the following? Which of the following can be inferred? Now, can you see here? You not only have to read and comprehend the passage, you would have to reason further. So it becomes sort of tricky. The exact option, that part of information need not be mentioned in the passage. You are allowed to make an inference. But remember, it should not be too far-fetched an inference as well. That's the grayness of verbal. You can't infer something far-fetched, but something almost implicit but not written can be inferred. And sometimes what happens when people are being literal, oh, they might say, oh, none of the 5 options are written and it seems wrong. But the question wording may have been, oh, the passage implies, or the author is most likely. So it need not have been exactly there. If it's something that can be sort of extracted out of the passage, then you're good to go, even if it's not directly mentioned. And therefore, that doesn't make the question wrong, like we sometimes feel in the exam. Sometimes 2 options come close. But if it's a slight inference, then it can't, if it's not exactly mentioned, then passage mentions, it won't fit in as an answer. And always read this so that your brain becomes ready. Oh, according to the passage, I'm going to power through. I'm going to look for a little more factual correlation with the option, and I'll be done. And on the NMAT, you'll find these easier 2 types more often than not because of the time restriction. The central theme of the passage on type 2, and type 1, the passage mentions or the details or according to the passage or the word is used in which context is what will comprise your 4 questions. On CAT, ZAT, maybe more towards the reasoning basis. The third type may also come. So let's look at it. Indirect exporting. So which was all where you almost get rid of everything except for the manufacturing. So internal transport is out, and I can see it here. It is now the responsibility of the export merchant. FDI, foreign direct investment, is out. So it is not our problem again. Administrative problems are out, and again, it's written convenient to administer. But see, I'm using the fact that I inferred this was indirect indirect exporting. So administrative problems are out. Dealing with intermediaries, but there are no intermediaries by definition in a dealing with intermediary. Sorry, I made a mistake there. Intermediaries are there in the indirect exporting, but dealing with intermediaries can be a painful process. Now, this possible, but was this mentioned, is now we're wanting to get literal. Even though you might think it's painful, it should be given as well. Okay, so can I make this inference? No. You see, when I was trying to tell you the point of how far can you stretch in an inference context, it has to almost 99% be there, but not through sort of general experience. There should be logic for it. So although this might be the experience sometimes and you might be losing control, but is this there? Now let's check that. And this is where I might spend my 30 seconds checking if I have the time. The exporter assumes full responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Export merchants, for example, reside acting as principals. They are wholesalers. So no pain, do not carry the risk. They lose control over the presentation. This is a drawback. Exporting is cheap, carries no risk of failure, accrue, and the firm builds up. So there's nothing of this sort. And this option, poor presentation might affect, is directly this line. And can you see tallying with according? And this will always happen on the NMAT. Check. So I think anyways, all of you all gave the right answer as well. So I'm going to quickly now try and take the question before that. The phrase strategic decision. So again, a little reasoning is there in these kind of things, but still detail oriented. So first you'll have to track strategic decisions. And it's not like a very friendly exam where it has marked it out for you. So you will have to sit and find it. So I want you all to key in your answers for this now, quickly. Can everyone key in their answers? Let's see. So I'll first have to find it. So, exporting means the sale and there was no strategic there. Some forms regard exporting. I'm trying to recreate what I would do in the exam. Others see it as a crucial element. Passive exporting means a firm receives orders after active results from a strategic decision to establish proper systems for organizing the export. And for me, really, many times, if you try and go to the options directly and try and eliminate, can become tricky, especially when you get locked or confused between 2 options. So first, I would spend 5 seconds thinking, actually, what does it mean in this context? So that's what I'm going to try and do. And always I would do that for central main purpose, central point, for the meaning of the phrase or the word. So active exporting conversely results from a strategic decision to establish proper systems for organizing the export function and for procuring foreign sales. So what does it stand for? Active exporting sort of is resulting from this decision, this strategy decision to do this. So it's sort of looking like I have this thought process from before, and that entails me to do this. And that's when I'll go ahead and implement the other thing. So it's a decision which I'm making before I implement some pieces of action. Can we see that thing, that the decision is about creating a strategy for strategic decision, creating a strategy before getting into sort of whether to open it there or not. So I'm having some kind of thought process from before. So is it a method to establish? Does it result from a method to establish? Does it result from an instance? That's definitely out. There's no example sort of thing. Does it result from a good plan? Maybe. Doesn't look that bad. Does it result from a pilot study, from some study we did? Maybe. In some specific case, that strategic decision could have come from a pilot study. See what I'm saying? I can think that the strategic decision in some cases may be based on a pilot study, but that's a specific scenario. In general, we don't know that. Or is it a premeditated plan? Oh, that's also good now compared to good plan. So that's when I'll have to now separate the two options and check what some reason has to be there, right? And what is it? Is it a good decision? Is the strategic decision a good plan or a premeditated plan? And can you see whether it's going to be good or bad is going to be decided later on by the success of the whole thing. Right now, all we can say is, oh, we're thinking, then we are doing. So that premeditated aspect is what is standing out for me. I'm thinking, I'm strategizing, and then I'm implementing. Again, whether it comes out to be good or bad is not what is happening right now. I hope it is good, but that's not the strategic decision, the central characteristic of the strategic decision. More important is I'm doing it beforehand, and therefore I'll reject good plan. This last part that I did here is what you should always try to do when you have two options that are confusing. Read them literally again. Try and see what they actually mean and whether it applies calmly. Because there will be a sense of panic. You have to override that and just think again which one is applicable to the given situation. Let's quickly look at the last two. The word accrue most nearly means, and can you all key in your answer again, right? Almost now in this case, there's almost no doubt, right? Because the other meanings are far off from its common, very frequently used meaning as well. But let's say if I were to try and find it now, how would I again try and find it? I wouldn't go random. I just, again try and now speed read, having gotten the idea. Means the sale of an item stored, processed. Some firms regard, others see it as a crucial. Passive exporting occurs when a firm receives. Active, nothing. Direct exporting. Indirect uses intermediaries. Trying and selling, and I'm not finding it. So I'm moving on. Exporting is cheap. Let's say you have a gut feel. I'll go to the paragraph 2. I've sort of ignored paragraph 1 last part. And the firm builds up a network. Total prevents the need to share. Exporting. Really, I've missed it, but here it is, right? In the second paragraph. And does it mean the revenues from foreign sales waste or lessen, scatter or dissipate? The tone of the passage is almost as well ruling out this, right? Because neither the export merchant, neither the base company which is manufacturing, none of them would get involved with something that will waste, scatter, or dissipate, that kind of tonality is not there. Even between those two, they are sort of in a symbiotic mutual relationship. Do you see? Just even doesn't fit. Plus, this is the usual meaning of accrue. So I'm very happy with collect. But again, if I have identified this is indirect exporting, the revenues from foreign sales, if that clear-cut comprehension is coming, then can you see it's almost even direct. The revenue of foreign sales accrue to that exporting company, right? In the sense, when you sell your goods to the export merchant, you get your entire money. Then what happens to the money being made by selling your manufactured goods by the export merchant in that other foreign country? None of your business. You collect your entire amount in almost your currency because he's lifting it from your, so to say, place, and he's responsible for the transport. So collect is very nicely fitting there, and I have no doubt this is where you can save time. Again, question type. So, how can you categorize it? Type 1, almost direct detail. Type 2, sort of thematic. And type 3, you have to infer. In type 1, direct detail or something like this, direct word meaning almost. Type 2, thematic, like main purpose, summary, or something like the strategic decisions I might put into type 2, like you have to do some bit of reasoning. So 3 levels: identification, key, so that you know when to power through. Now, this is a case where I feel the options came very close in my exam. So can you all key in your answers? I want to see your answers as well in this. I have one. I'm waiting for another answer. If confused between two options, put both options. Which are the two options that confuse you? So in the interest of time, I'll move ahead. Again, in a central idea, I really like first taking 10 seconds and thinking in my own head as to what's the central idea, with what purpose has the author written it. So the author clearly wants to talk about exporting. What does it mean? Looking at it as passive or active. And then the other two types, direct or indirect. And then what he's done a lot is, after explaining direct, he's taken a whole new paragraph to explain the advantages and the disadvantages of those types of exporting. So how sales are dependent, is that the theme? No, he's saying yes, that you can get good amount of sales. Sometimes you may not have asked for those sales in passive form. Sometimes you seek them out. But is that the main? Is it even covering the types, the direct, the indirect? No. How business depends heavily, he's firstly not arguing that it depends heavily. He says it may or may not. And it again doesn't cover the whole main point, which is about direct, indirect, its advantages, its disadvantages. So exporting, its role being covered nicely here. That what can it do for you? It can bring in money. What does it mean? Its types: passive, active, direct, indirect. And why is this option great? Why do I like it? So I'm going to keep it. It's also covering the merits and demerits point. So I'm going to really keep it. The process of exporting. Now, that ain't bad either. And the types of exports. Slightly confusing here again, right? Types of exports means, are they talking about the exports as a noun means what? The goods that you are sending out. So are we talking about the types of goods that we are sending across, or the various types of exporting? So, for me, see, this minor detail and very important to read literally can separate the right from the wrong between the two close options. So I'll come back to D. Export merchants act as catalysts. It may be true, firstly not given and in as many words, and it is a very minor detail, you see. So in central idea, the theme of it shouldn't be too narrow, it shouldn't be too broad. Like, is it an additional way to make more sales? Exporting, yes, but it's too broad. Narrow, that in that indirect exporting, export merchants can maybe sometimes help you out. Too narrow. So don't want to be too narrow, don't want to be too broad. So now these two can be confusing, as you can see with me here. And the process of exporting is that. Now see, suppose confusion is happening, like in this case. So I would want you to look at each word. Is it more about the process? Can say within the types, the direct and the indirect, I have mentioned many process oriented statements as well. But more important is the type and the types of exports. That sort of, again, see how I'm handling it. When a confusing pronoun or a noun is there, look for what it stands. It stands for the goods, and that's also not great. and helps me release this option. And the advantage here is merits, demerits. Why am I focusing more? This is the situation you might find yourself in many times, to close options. Then look at each word, look at the noun. If it's a pronoun, look for what it stands for. Does it apply? Which one is a better fit? And you will slowly start seeing the gap. And my final tip is, in the exam, you will of course go with all these thought processes, but have to, in the interest of time, tick one answer and move on. What you should do is go back in your untimed after you've done a mock in the no time limit without having seen the right answer. See, very important. Don't see the right answer. You remember, oh, this RC question 2, I was troubled between options C and D. Now, don't check the right answer, because then you will back engineer the reasoning that, oh, if C is right, this must be a little bit better for these reasons. Don't see it and then try and play this game between the two options, almost evaluating it word for word and reading it very literally. 2 points. Read it literally, evaluate it word by word, and see which one would fit and why. If you do it for even 5 or 10 questions where you are stuck in the no time limit, and then check whether they come right, then you are improving. Otherwise, then taking the mock is just practicing. You're sort of trying to get the score you should be getting. If you want to get a score higher than what you are getting now and higher than your current level, then you have to improve your level. And that happens through the review that I just described. And you almost have, or you must do it without having looked at the right answer. Because otherwise, what is this taking a mock? It's like checking the body temperature. Nothing will happen then. You have to sort of eat well, do the right things, and then it will improve, right? That is like reviewing your mock. So I've seen both cases. Either people will not take a mock, कि कम आ जाएगा तो फिर कैसे होगा, almost trying to avoid reality, or then take a mock and then sort of check the explanation for the right answers quickly, see what went right, what went wrong, read the explanations, and then quickly take a next mock, almost again trying to avoid the results of the first mock, little bit here and there improvement, and then give the second mock hoping it will be very different, so as to avoid the unpleasantness that a low mock score sort of provides you. But life ain't like that. You're going to face losses. So a low mock score, an opportunity in an experimental situation, like in a lab situation. Feel the low score and then improve on each question. Your overall score in the exam will also rise. It will have to. So I'll end this session here. Hope it helped you all. And we'll again try and meet for a fresh session tomorrow, right? So we've almost done a week now, right? Hope this helped you all. I'll close the session now. Good night.